But welcome to our IT Professionals Conference 2025.
Presentation. Welcome, IT Pro Conf 2025. Image. A large building with columns and a lit red exterior stands under a twilight sky.
If you need live captioning, that is available. If you scan the QR code, there's also QR codes on most tables. That will take you to a site that will be able to, you can get the live captioning on your phone.
Slide. UW-Madison Land Acknowledgement.
As part of this conference, we would like to acknowledge the University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Tejop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed, and when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. We acknowledge the circumstances that led to the forced removal of the Ho-Chunk people and honor their legacy of resistance and resilience. The history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin.
Slide. Code of Conduct.
I'd like to also acknowledge a code of conduct, that this is a workplace of inclusivity and to be professional, considerate, and respectful to all those who you contact today, and just to remember to be kind. We appreciate everyone's patience as we were dealing with these technical issues. And so along with today's conference, you'll have the opportunity to participate in sessions tomorrow. Just remember to be positive in your comments and questions.
Slide. Live captioning.
So once again, there's the QR code for live captioning. It's a little bit bigger if you need that.
Slide. Zoom events in person.
You can participate in Zoom events in person. If you need to, you can download the Zoom Workplace from the App Store, log in using SSO, go to the More Events, and you should be able to access the event from there, which includes the full schedule and details. You can check out the speakers' bios and things like that through the Zoom Events site.
Slide. Conference trivia.
So I enjoy a little bit of trivia. So I have a question for all of you. What do you think? This year is the blank iteration of the IT Professionals Conference. Is it the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, or the 10th? What do you think? If you think it's the 9th iteration, you are correct. The first session was held back in 2017, and this has been a homegrown conference of IT professionals for IT professionals. And we are really looking forward to the continued success of this conference.
Slide. Thanks.
So I'd like to give a special thanks to many people who have been involved with planning this and being in charge of it. First off, the Office of the CIO and Lois Brooks. We also thank Todd Schechter, IT Connects, the IT Awards Committee, Becky Morgan, Laura Bellman, Brianna Kuhn, all of the presenters, moderators, and tech support, and of course the IT community at large.
Slide.
It takes a lot of work to put the conference together. So I'd like to give a special thanks to these folks, especially my co-chair in running the conference, Elizabeth Kraege-Soechting, and our project manager, Rebecca Novak. We have 4 steering committees for program, website, marketing, finance, and events. And then we had many, many people who helped make this possible, who you can see on the screen here.
Slide. Some new faces, logos, and names of universities of Wisconsin across state map.
We have invited some new faces this year. For the first time, we have opened it up to members of the IT community from across the universities of Wisconsin. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Kent Gerbrick of the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, for reaching out to us on behalf of the CIO Council and getting the ball rolling on that.
Slide. Live session schedule May 29th, today.
So today we are starting off with our keynote from Lois Brooks. The only constant is change. We have a full day of great sessions and with 15-minute breaks between each one. And you can, once again, you can see the full schedule on the Zoom events site. Also, for those who are in person, on the back of your name badge.
A table with an itinerary.
At the end of the day, there will be the IT awards ceremony with some light refreshments that will be served with that, and we look forward to seeing you all there. It will be a great event.
Slide.
Tomorrow we have more sessions, a great day of virtual sessions with many topics including AI, the unconference, and project management. So check that out.
Slide. Because we all love data and caffeine.
And we're all IT, so we love our data and we love our caffeine. And so one of the cool little Easter eggs on the website is the coffee bar where you can say, I've had a drink of tea today. And you can put it in and we get to see as the day progresses our consumption of the beverages available to us.
Slide. Conference trivia.
Hey, let's do another piece of trivia. In what year was the first two-day IT Professionals Conference? It started out as just one day, but now we've gone to this two-day Thursday, Friday. If you think it was 2020, you are correct. This year was also the first year of the IT Recognition Awards. It was a year of highs and lows, as we all remember, with the high, definitely the IT Recognition Awards. You know, a lot of home time.
Slide. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming today and being part of our conference. Thank you everyone who is joining online virtually. We look forward to being with you in those sessions as well. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote address, Lois Brooks.
A woman with glasses wears a red sweater. Text. Lois Brooks. Video feed in right corner. People sit at round tables in a room with large windows while a speaker presents a slide.
Lois is someone who needs no introduction, but she's going to get one anyways. Lois is the Vice Provost for Information Technology and the CIO since 2018. She's been a champion of technology in education, which includes co-founding the Sakai Foundation, now called Apereo, and the Unizin Consortium. She's also been in leadership and governance roles with Northwest Academic Computing Consortium, Educase, and Internet2, and she has been a huge support for the growth of IT Connects here at UW-Madison. In her free time, Lois loves to hike, and especially when it's in her home state of California. And we are really grateful for all the service that Lois has given over the years, and we look forward to hearing her address today. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
A beige vintage portable computer has a built-in screen, floppy drives, and a detachable keyboard.
Thanks, David. Mic check. Sound good? Okay, awesome. Hey, good morning, everybody. It is fantastic to be in your company today, and I want to give a special shout out to our friends from around the state who are here. It is going to be even more fun because you're here. Sorry, we have a tilted platform, which doesn't bode well for the water. We'll work that out. Hey, so this was my first computer. This is a prototype of an IBM portable. It's about the size of a suitcase, and you can see in the front there are two 5.5-inch floppy drives, and then this little monitor that was embedded. It weighed about 30 pounds, and you can just see on the top back edge there was a handle that made it portable at the time. I had just started working at Stanford. I was an entry-level job as a departmental assistant. IBM gave this to my boss. He didn't want it, so he gave it to me. And I started playing around with it. And you have to realize what work was like in 1984, that we did accounting on paper ledgers with pencils and calculators. That's how the university ran itself. A few people had the old ARPANET email, but most people didn't. And so you would come in the morning and have your stack of correspondence and open up your envelopes and have your assistant or your secretary type your response. And then you would mail that out and 10 days later get a reply to it. That's how we did our work at the university. Um, Everything was manual, everything was on paper. Some of you may remember standing in line to register for classes. That was the way we did things. But it was Stanford, the university that launched Silicon Valley, the year the personal computer came out. And everything started to change. More computers started to roll. I started built some simple databases for the billing that my department did. We started using simple word processors. Before that, we had to use whiteout to make changes, and so backspacing to retype was novel. Um, and then we started stringing phone net cables. Anybody who doesn't know what that is, you just Google it. Started stringing phone net cables through the ceilings in our offices to connect printers. And printers were amazing because before that, if you wanted a print job, you sent it to the mainframe, and then the next day you walked over to the computer center and picked up your stack of gray bar to get your printouts. And so having a printer like right there that you could go get something from, wowza. Amazing. And so the phone net cables gave way to coax cables, gave way to Ethernet cables. We started building networking around the university. One thing led to the next, and it was always new and changing. And at the time, I had been beta testing some software. It was called Mac Samson, but it allowed you to connect your computer to the network. Because at the time, your computer didn't actually just connect to the network. You had to launch a program to make it connect. And that beta testing I did led to me being invited to join the university's first, what we would call now field support, but it was the first little kind of desktop computing support team. So in 1990, I shifted to that team. And it was the heyday. It was one new thing after the next, after the next. And my job was deploying new technology, helping people use new technology. So we deployed fleets of hundreds of computers. And I will say as a side note, at the day, we required faculty to take a class before they were allowed to have a computer. Things have changed. Um, and but we spent 3 or 4 years and everything was new, and we're in Silicon Valley. And so Sun Microsystems and Apple and IBM were all our neighbors, and we were doing beta testing with them and engaged with them. And it was exhilarating and fun. And I started getting pushback from people on using new technology. So I'm in the one at the university like, yay, this is new, let's upgrade something new. And things started to change. And I was thinking, what is going on? Why don't people want the new thing?
Slide.
So why do people adopt new technology? They adopt it because it brings convenience to them in some way. They adopt it for excitement, out of fear of missing out, for social influence, to be the first mover. That was my life. I was that person. And they also adopt it because it solves a problem for them. And I'm going to come back to this one because I think this is actually key to the pushback I started to get.
Red human figures stand among black ones to show ratios.
So we think about this is more contemporary. This is a survey from last year. But how receptive are people to technology change? This survey said that 1 in 7 refused to use new technology in the workspace. And as we think about, by the way, going into the shift to workday in a month, it's kind of been on my mind, these stats. 1 in 7 just refused to use it. 39% are reluctant about it. And 51% believe that new technology is more disruptive than helpful. And this is a really important thing to keep in mind. And so I started to think about, okay, why are people pushing back on me? And it really came to this.
Slide.
People had adopted a technology to solve a problem. Maybe that problem was distributing course materials to their students, or allowing students to register online, or doing a spreadsheet rather than a paper journal so it would automatically update the numbers. They were solving a problem, and that's why they had adopted. And that problem had already been solved. And so when the new technology came out, their problem was already solved, so it was more disruptive than helpful to them. And so I had to pull back and think about, why do I care? Why do I care if people adopt new technology? I absolutely care for cybersecurity reasons. I care because old technology is difficult and costly to support, and it might be hard on the support team. Um, but I had to really accept that even though I was the tech evangelist, that the pain of what I was pushing might be greater than the value they perceived because their problems had already been solved.
Slide.
And so I had to pivot, and it really caused me to rethink my job. And this stays with me today that my job is not to push technology. My job is to help people solve real problems and get value from technology.
Slide. Change is the only constant.
So, as I talked to David and Elizabeth about what to talk about here this morning, we hit on this theme of change and intentionality in responding to change. And so I'm going to talk about this in three parts.
Slide.
We just talked about the first one, our role as change agents and how to be mindful and intentional about why you're pushing change and what it means to other people. I want to shift in and talk about life changes.
Slide.
We have life changes. We have families, we have parents. They might require care. Others around us might require care. We might have our own health issues that happen. We may have other life events that happen. We are whole and complete people. And sometimes work and life bump into each other. I have all of these things and more happen. Um, and this is from the recent, last university staff climate survey. I pulled out a couple data points. The pie graph up on top asks the question, have you had significant care responsibilities in the past 3 years? 42% of our community said yes. That's a lot of people here in this room and across the university that are juggling. And then navigating the bar charts below, pulled out the answer to three questions. Have these care responsibilities influenced your productivity, delayed your projects or caused a loss of projects, or um, impacted your commitment to your job? More people said that it impacted their productivity than their commitment, but there is definitely some juggling happening out there. Um, So, in my own life, navigating work while being a young single parent with a boss who did not support people taking time off for childcare. This is back before it was policy that you got time off for childcare. Um, it required some juggling, some productivity. My father-in-law moved in with us when he was 92, and we cared for him through the last 3 years of his life, navigated his end of life care. And I've had other elder care as well. And I know many of you have had that. All of us have these changes that we have to navigate. I've had a couple orthopedic surgeries that took me out for a month each that I just had to hand off work. And that was the way that we had to manage it. So as we think about navigating life changes, um, there is a lot that's happening. School's going to start in the fall. ATP is coming next month. Workday is coming next month. And as a team, we have to be ready and we have to navigate that. But within this space, we can create space for each other to juggle life and work together. Now, sometimes it's pretty easy. You say, I've got a deadline looming and I've got a sick kid. Let me go renegotiate that. That's a short-term problem. Sometimes you're going to need a bigger adjustment. You're going to have to negotiate maybe a little bit of a shift. I also want to acknowledge that sometimes it's more than you can handle and that you may need some outside help. You may say, this job is not for me. I can't do this right now. That's an unusual circumstance, and I've seen it happen, but I want to acknowledge it. And then we step back from, kind of acknowledging that extreme case and say, sometimes we just need space and grace to navigate life changes.
Slide.
The lessons learned on this: as individuals, be mindful and thoughtful about what you need for yourself. Recognize that you need maybe just a little shift in a deadline. Maybe you need something that's a little bit bigger, but be intentional and mindful about it. As managers, we have to navigate that big picture. We have to deliver, right? But within that, we can create space for our team to be whole and complete individuals and juggle their complex life changes. And I can say from personal experience, I've had inflexible bosses over the years, and I've had others who gave me a little bit of autonomy to manage so that I still had to meet my work goals, but I could take a little time off for a parent care or a child care doctor's appointment and just flex it and hit my goals. And when I'm given that level of kind of flexibility for myself, I'm a much better employee. And I've seen as a manager, when I can give that space to create and hit our deadlines, but flex within it, the team performs better. We retain high quality employees. So the lesson learned as an employee, be mindful about what you need, be on top of it. And as a manager, create the space for other people to be whole and complete individuals.
Slide, reflections in 3 parts, navigating external changes.
Okay, so that was change number 2. We talked about being a change agent, and we talked about life changes. Talk about navigating external changes, things that happen that are out of our control. So what happens is out of our control, like everything. Um, Pandemics, budget cuts, big projects like ATP that are a lot of work, reorganizations, new rules and working parameters, cybersecurity rules, new federal regulations that are coming at us, the position cap that those of us managing have to deal with, new bosses. I've had here at Madison, I've been here 7 years. I have had 6 bosses in 7 years. I had actually 6 bosses in 5 years, but the last one, Dr. Isabel, has stayed for 2 years. So now it's 6 and 7. I've had changes where my boss said, what you're working on is no longer a priority. We're going to need you to pivot. Um, this is the reality that we live in, that things change around us that are out of our control.
Slide,
Now, when this happens, when change is proposed, most people immediately say, what does it mean to me? What is in this for me? Why is it happening? And what will it look like when the change has been made? And the immediate mindset they go to is this is going to be costly, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be weird. By difficult, I mean, I don't know how to do this, or other people don't know how to do it, or they're going to make it hard for me. It's just going to be hard. Costly means you're taking away from me something that I value. I may get my esteem or enjoy my work that I find value in myself because of the work I've been doing, and that's going to change. It may be that it's changing my team around me, the people that I like and I value. I'm going to have to navigate new relationships and maybe not get to work with people I like as closely. And weird just means this is not how we do things here. Um,
diagram.
and when these changes happen, we have a choice in what we do. We can freeze. A little bit of a riff here on stress responses. We can freeze, just like a little quiet quitting in place. I'm just going to back away and not do anything. We can fight that change. I'm not going to stand for this. And I'm just going to tell you right up front, that does not work. The decision has already been made. We can choose to flee. Keep doing your good work. Don't storm out. But maybe eyes are up and you're looking around a little bit to see what the other opportunities are. I have done that a time or two. It's legit. You can do that. Or you could flow. And this is my 98% response, what I do when the change happens around me. And what flow means to me is this, that it's up to me to adapt to this change. I get a new boss, that's my new reality. I'm the one that has to adapt to that change. Um, ATP is coming. It has been a lot of work for our community, a lot of work ahead. We had to figure that out and are still figuring it out. It was up to us to adapt. Within these kinds of changes, I think for myself, okay, what's in it for me? Um, do I get to take something new on? Do I get to adapt to stretch my skills a little bit? Can I grow? When the pandemic was the change, what flow meant was just standing shoulder to shoulder with all of you and the community, getting done what had to be done, being present, being resilient, being supportive. Other kinds of changes, like with the new boss, I have to think, okay, what do I want from this relationship? What do they want? What do I want to assert? How do I want to use the time they give me? How do I want to work with this person? How do they want to work with me? When other new changes come along, and they just happen all the time, my go-to response is, okay, how am I going to be successful in this space? Just leave you with this, that things are going to happen, and these things are out of our control. Sometimes they are really wonderful things. I welcomed a child into my life 40 years ago. That was life altering. It was wonderful. It's a lot of work sometimes, but it's a wonderful change. I am preparing for retirement in a couple of weeks. That's a change that I've sought, a change that I've enacted, but it's a pretty big life change to navigate. These are good and positive changes. Other changes are a lot more challenging and disruptive than we would like them to be. And that is the reality we live in. But whether the change is good or whether the change is challenging, what we can control is how we intentionally respond to it, who we want to be in that moment, how we want to adapt our lives, what our response is going to be. And so I will leave you with this, and then let's just talk. Um, this quote I love. uh,
Slide.
Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% on how I react to it. So I will leave you with those starting thoughts, and I would love to have a conversation with you.
Text Charles Swindoll.
If you have questions or comments in the room, we have a microphone set up there in the middle. So that way we can make sure everyone in the room hears the question and everyone online. For those of you online who have a question, feel free to put it into the chat and we'll make sure that those questions are read out loud. All right.
You should talk with me, or otherwise I will pull you.
Can you hear me?
Just.
Awesome. I was really, well, I'm a child of the 70s. Kind of missed your 84, 30-pound computer, but I came in shortly after that, so I know exactly what you're talking about. What really struck me is you talked about how at Stanford you worked with all the startups in Silicon Valley at the time. And it seems like there was a really fast-paced set of innovation at Stanford. And I'm thinking, how do we address that where we are today, where it seems like that pace of innovation as the university kind of leading the private sector and how we do technology and how we do things with technology, it seems like that has slowed and there's more barriers in place to that innovation these days. How can we look at that differently? How can we approach it differently? Or what do you think we can do differently going forward to kind of catch back up and become a leader in innovation for businesses instead of businesses leading us?
So a couple parts to that question. And, it's interesting because as we've grown at the university, in our use of technology, we've had to attend to things like supportability, licensing management, excuse me, and we can be slow to deploy technology because we have to button it down, make sure it's working for everyone, right? And the cost of change is pretty high because, when we change something, we're changing it for 75,000 people in our employee and student community. Um, Within that, though, we have really interesting pockets of innovation, and AI is the great example right now. I don't think I've ever seen anything move as quickly as AI is moving in terms of the capabilities, in terms of the entrance to the market, the changes. We went through a period last winter where we went through, I think it was a licensing change every single week for about a month or 6 weeks, as companies were competing for our attention and trying to figure out their own pricing structures. Um, we need to figure out how to um, work with our innovation, or maybe better, we do everything here really well, to be honest, but there are always things we can work on. If we have pockets of innovation doing something really interesting within the university, what does that look like then to bring that innovation into the mainstream? Right? That maybe we think about creating constructive cycles of our innovators at the edge, as we understand what works, bringing that back into our mainstream practices more quickly. The other part of your question was engagement with the vendor community around us. I think that one's a little bit more challenging than it used to be back in the day. Back in the day, the university was looking for the university to be its test bed, And being in Silicon Valley, we were monetizing and doing, startup after startup. There was a reason that Google and Yahoo came out of the Stanford dorms, because that was the DNA of the computer, to be an incubator for companies and then to monetize those interactions. The university actually does a fair amount of tech transfer and tech licensing, but that is kind of a pipeline from research to the companies, and it skips the operation of the university. I don't actually know what the answer to that is. I'd love to hear answers from in the room, as we in the operational IT community, are there ways to be more deeply engaged in that? And I have no idea if that answered your question or not, but that's what it made me think about.
We have a question from online from Patty Havlicek. What advice would you give the new CIO?
Oh, advice for Didier. The lot of advice. Actually, I've given him a fair amount of advice already. A couple things. The entire currency of this university is on relationship, and you tend to those relationships. You build them, they care for them. That his top priority when he gets here is building relationships, and he's actually a real people person. He's going to do that. The other advice I would give is that many of our jobs take a lot of stamina, and that self-care, finding what you need so that you don't burn yourself out, is really, really important. I've got my own ways I do that. I've talked about some of them in public before, including walking to meetings by myself so I get just a couple minutes, in my own head. He'll find his own ways, but there's a tendency to come in and say, I need to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, because there's a lot to do and I want to be great at this job. And that is kind of a recipe for burnout. So my advice to him would be, build your network, build your friends, and take good care of yourself coming into the job.
Another question from online. Are there any projects or accomplishments that you weren't able to do that you wish you would have been able to complete before your retirement?
I can't answer that question. um, we've done a lot here. Absolutely gobsmacked, amazed with the work that the interoperability team, completely rebuilding the interoperability infrastructure. ATP has gone, it's so much work. It's actually gone really, really well, and we're ready to go next month. There'll be bumps in July, but August will be fine, and we are amazed. We've done these really big, kind of important things. I'm Okay, I'll just say it. I wish we'd gotten farther along on the network restructuring. I think that's really, really important to take us to our next generation of network infrastructure at the university. I wish we'd gotten farther along on that. We have made really good strides on cybersecurity, and we are both in fantastic shape, and we're always behind, right? Because the hackers are so good. And so, holding the pace, holding the innovation, the deployment cycle on cybersecurity is going to be really incredibly important. Okay. Yeah, that's really it. And sorry, network guys.
Takes a little work to get over to the microphone. Thinking back to your slide where you had the 4 Fs, which anybody that's been through more training will appreciate having the alliteration there. You had the flow and the fear and the flee and all of that. A lot of that is like you want to get to the flow, but for some people it's really hard. You just have that built-in reflex to flee or to freeze. What kind of tips or tricks would you give people that are trying to get more to the flow, how they can actually do that and get past some of those mental barriers that just instinctively make you freeze?
I have, so the question about how do you get past it? One is just practice. You learn that you have to get past it, that freezing and fighting, you're just going to be mad and frustrated. And if you don't want to be mad and frustrated, you need to get in the flow with it. I have a rule for myself. It's called the 1 bad day rule, that if I'm really irritated about something, I give myself 1 day, just be as irritated as I want to be, but the next day, get on with it, right? And get in and figure out, so you kind of acknowledge those reactions, acknowledge that you may not like it, but then just get on with it and say, okay, how I want to live a good life. I want to be happy at work. I want to like my work. And so how am I going to get there to be happy and like my work? How am I going to find the good? And one of the things I've learned over the years, and particularly as I've gotten closer to university leadership, is they're not rash. When they make a decision, even if I don't agree with that decision, it's based in the best that they could do with what they had available to them. And so trying to get to an understanding why they're actually doing this thing that I may not get. One of the things, I'll give an example of that. Are you all familiar with the position cap that came out, right? When that came out, it was like, what? What? And so it took a little bit of time to get into it, to try to understand the basis of it, why they made it agreement, what it was going to mean, and kind of got to a place. It just hit me one day. This is not the worst management problem I've had. I have all the positions I'm going to have. I've got my whole budget, which is not always the case. And to say, okay, I've got these parameters. I can work with them. How am I going to work within it? And to just get practical about, okay, what am I going to do given the constraints that are around me? How am I going to succeed given these parameters? But I will say, Jason, that I think some of it is just experience, knowing that you've got to get to that space pretty quickly, or you're not going to have a happy life. And 1 bad day to really be grumpy about something.
All right, we have a comment from online from Alan. In the bigger picture of change reactions, the fight option becomes possible via the other 3 options when networks and communities of people build consensus and collaboration around how to resist a change by offering a better option. What would you think about that?
I think that is absolutely the case. Is that Alan Eng? Yeah. My head, when you say that, Alan, my head immediately goes to community action. To say there's something happening in the world around me, I don't like it, so I'm going to mobilize community. And that is absolutely a valid reaction and a valid way to spend your time to try to enforce the change to make the world be the world that you want it to be. I think that's actually more successful in community action than it might be at the university. Although within the university, if there's kind of an overarching framework of change coming, we can absolutely, through community work, through positive and proactive and productive conversation moving forward. Not, I just don't like that, so you can't do it, but hey, you know what? There's some way we can work with this and that might be better than what you came up with. That is absolutely possible. And I see that all the time, and we do that all the time. There have been many occasions at this university and other jobs where people have come to my office and say, you got this thing you're talking about. Can I give you an alternate path or some nuance to that? And easily more than half the time, I accept all or part of what they had to say and say, yeah, that makes it better. But you have to frame it in a way that's not negative and confrontational, but positive and productive to make things better, that you're coming in to help. Coming up.
Hi, Lois.
Hey.
Jay Ray, IT manager with the libraries. I want to ask you about framing, because as the world gets more technical and our solutions to the problems of the world get more technical, how are we, how can we ensure that we're communicating inclusively what the real world problems we're trying to solve are to a community that potentially doesn't really understand what the problems even are anymore?
Can you maybe give me an example of what you're talking about there? It's like I understood what you said, but I think I'm not getting the underlying question.
Sure. So let's take changes in cybersecurity. I don't know. We'll say smart access.
Yep.
Right. How do we make sure that we're communicating that to non-technical folks, knowing that they're going to hit roadblocks along the way, that they don't truly understand what we're trying to solve for?
Yeah. Fair question. For those of you that don't know the term smart access is for the technical people in the room, it's our zero trust strategy. For people that don't speak zero trust, basically we're adding more nuanced layers of security that that protect things that need protection more fully with more security and less security around things that need less security. So it's more nuanced. It's going to force a change for everybody that interacts with the university's data and systems to do some things differently. And that change might look as simple, one that's coming next week, as having to type in a 3-digit code rather than press the green duo button. Or it may look like extra layers of security to log into a system. At the kind of more complete stages, it looks like your computer not being allowed to connect to the network unless it's fully patched, right? And so, that can be inconvenient. If I'm just trying to get my thing done and I haven't downloaded my patches and I have to go download my patches to get my thing done, it might be just annoying in the moment, I would say. But we need them to do that so that they don't infect our systems. I think what we need to do on this are a couple things. We have just launched this at the university into the tech community, just started talking about it in the last few weeks. We've been talking about it within the Division of IT for a while now and working through a lot of the underlying technical details. I think that we need to be really transparent about the fact that it's a bad world out there and hackers are really good at what they do. And one tiny little crack in the levee opens up to let the floodgates in. So it's up to each of us to protect the university, to be part of that protection surface that keeps people from hacking. And that message about responsibility, the message about we do clean computing at this university, only clean devices on our network because it will bring the rest of us down, is something that we need to just put out there over and over and over again. And then as we force each particular change, be kind of stand at the ready to help people through that first week where it's a little confusing. And then I don't know, you remember when we started doing Duo, it was confusing for a week and now all of us kind of like got our watches ready to go, right? When it's our time, it becomes second nature and we will get there with each of these new changes, but we should break it down and treat each one as its separate little change exercise. And by the way, we have to do this or we're going to get hacked, and hacking is really bad.
All right, we have a question from Scott Winger. And the question is, do you have any words of wisdom for how we can navigate changes that are coming from the federal level?
I'm going to give a really unsatisfying answer to this. It depends on what changes are coming from the federal level, and I suspect he's not asking about the new cybersecurity standards from NIH and NSF. Right? New cybersecurity standards from NIH and NSF. Let's just go do cybersecurity stuff and take care of it. I suspect he's asking about social change from the federal government, and this is my unsatisfying answer: that we need to separate our work lives from our personal lives on this. At work, the university and the university system will decide our compliance with the law and our direction. And we have no choice but to follow that direction that we get from them. That, as Chancellor Mnuchin says, we obey the law. And then there are people who work here who decide what obeying the law looks like. And even for me, as somebody fairly high placed at the university, I do not have a say in what that compliance with the law looks like, but I am required to do it and to not use any platform at work to protest against it. Those are the rules that are put around us as public employees. Separating out to our private lives, we may form and organize in our community as we choose. We may vote as we choose. We may donate as we choose, but that we must, as public employees, separate our personal reaction from our workplace reaction. I know that is not a satisfying answer, but it is actually the reality of being an employee of a state university. So anybody want to jump in on that one?
So I was really asking about words that might help us as professionals at work focus productively. What are the things that I might say to my customers? For example, I'm a help desk analyst, right? I talk to a lot of people. And it doesn't come up often, but I'm just wondering if you have words to help us help each other focus productively. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks for that clarification and maybe an avenue toward positivity. You know, we may get a directive that says something like, these words have to come off your website, and we comply with that. But that doesn't change who I am and how I treat people around me. It doesn't change the values I bring to how I hire, how I work with other people. It doesn't change the values in how I communicate and I welcome people into my community and into my circle and create a welcoming workspace for them. And so within a framework that we may get from the federal government, we still get to choose who we are as human beings and how we treat each other and what our workplace looks like. That is fully in our control with that. And I would say maybe our charge as a community is to double down on creating a workspace where each of us brings our full selves to work and knows that you are welcome here, that we're glad you're here, and we value what you contribute.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anybody have an easy question?
No.
Oh, throw me a lob, Nick.
So I appreciate the your emphasis on accepting the reality and finding a way to achieve flow with the parameters that you have. In the course of working and the relationships that we have, we're going to encounter people that you need something from or who need something from you, who are in the fight phase. Do you have any tips for helping people who are stuck professionally, like in some kind of process and want to fight you, to bring them into a flow state, to help turn the situation?
I'm not, again, I think you're asking me something, but you're asking me something else, and I'm not quite sure what the other.
I guess it's about how do you turn a potential adversary into a collaborator?
I don't know, you know, we've all had moments where we butt heads with somebody, have a difference with it. I try to do a couple of things. One is, somebody taught me years ago, it's kind of the coffee trick. It doesn't have to be coffee, any beverage of your choice. But when you take refreshment with somebody, when you sit down and you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever you're having, that act of doing that together creates a bond and a bridge. And so if you're having kind of a rough moment with somebody, the thing to do is invite them out for a beverage of choice and sit down and talk and just say, let's just take a few minutes together and reconnect as human beings. Figure out what the core issue is. And you know, if you're not into something that's deep and fundamental, like a difference in core values or ethics, but something that's overcomable, a disagreement about something that happened at work, an approach to something, how a meeting went, what have you, take it offline, sit down with them and find a moment to reconnect as humans. Maybe they end up being your besties, maybe they don't, but at the end of it, if you can have a positive and productive working relationship, however you define that, your work life is going to be a lot better. And quite frankly, if you don't, you're going to annoy everybody around you because the two of you are at odds, and it creates disruption, disharmony in the workplace. So kind of understand it's your responsibility not to do that. Did that get anywhere close to the answer to your question?
I like it.
Okay.
I'm happy to run the mic to anyone who wants it.
I'm going to lighten things up a little bit. What's the top 2 or 3 things on your list once you retire?
So my last day is June 20th, and on June 21st, we fly to South America to go to the Galapagos. Yeah. This is a bucket list trip for me. And then we've got some other travel planned. My husband's already retired, and so definitely time with them. I think many people know our family home is in Southern California, where our kids and grandkids are, and so a lot of family time coming up. So that's really it, is travel, time with the family, time with, gosh, envision reading something besides email and work reports. It's an exciting prospect. So it's just really changing it up, kind of more leisure, more time with the people around me.
I will continue the lighthearted question, I hope. Cliff Cunningham with the Learn UW-Madison team. You are in a rather unique generation that really saw massive leaps forward. And even by the time I got in, we were mostly switching from kilobytes to megabytes. That was the big thing. But I'm just curious, like, what do you consider the one or two biggest leaps in technology that you were able to personally witness and that made you kind of go, holy cow, this is massive?
Without a doubt, the web. It was interesting when the web came out. One of the things I've been struggling with was how to distribute files to people, and we did FTP at the time, and it was kludgy, and getting data was really interesting. And the first time I saw the web, it was just this jaw-dropping moment. Like, this fixes everything. That we can navigate to information, we can get information to people, and then you think about what's happened with the web. Citizen journalism and our view of the world based on the fact that people can report what's going on around them. It really completely changed the worldview on some of the social crises in parts of the world, because we got a different view than the curated one that was happening around us. In the workplace, we could easily get information to people, receive information. Pricing. Before the web, we didn't have immediate access to what things would cost. And so we were always at the mercy of what the salesperson was going to tell us something cost. And so the ability just to get quickly price sheets from all the vendors we work with so we could do our first level comparison and to force them into some level of consistency with us. Mind breaking. It just caused change after change after change in how we work with the university and how we work in society. I had the same moment, and it hasn't really taken hold in mainstream, but the next time I had that "this will change everything" moment was the first time I saw augmented reality. The ability to kind of change education, to change our interaction with the space around us, and to mix realities. Just a couple quick examples of that. Some of the neat examples I've seen is the ability to do like first responder or first aid training with this, and to create different situations for people without having to have you can create a situation of somebody in more crisis through virtual reality than you can do in real life, for example. Or our ability to fly under bridges and have experts look at crack and bridging infrastructure through augmented reality that changes engineering and safety. There's so many applications of it. It's still kind of difficult, and it's still coming out in mainstream. But if it does become mainstream, I think it has the ability to change things in a really amazing way. AI.
Closes presentation.
The jury's still out for me on how much of a sea change it will be, in terms of really creating something that's different, creating things that are faster, absolutely. Deeper dives into data, absolutely. Will it be fundamentally different like the web was fundamentally different? I don't know yet, but it's still early days.
Lois stands near the podium in the conference room before the audience.
People in the room, can you please speak louder into the microphone? Thank you very much.
Sure. I am wondering, as somebody who came to UW-Madison from another institution, and now that you are on your way out, what would you encourage us to do in terms of self-reflection, both as an IT community and perhaps as a campus? So maybe what are some of the things you wish that we better understood about potential gaps in how we function?
So we are really amazing here. I just want to say we don't have these wide gaps, but there are always things, right? Always things to work on. I think a couple things that we are very, very busy, and it's sometimes very easy to be busy in the problem of the moment and the problem of the day, without kind of taking a step back to say, is there a way that I can kind of automate this, prevent this problem from happening in the future, kind of think a little bit bigger, more systemic long term here. So I would say maybe maybe sometimes kind of a step back for a little reflection. We have in our organization a practice of post-incident review, which is an active analysis. When something happens, to say, okay, why did that happen? What went well? What didn't go well? What are we going to do? And then we act on what didn't go well. I think that's a really healthy and good practice. And I think that we can extend that in kind of lightweight ways to more things that we do, to say, okay, that interaction didn't go pretty well. Let me just not be vexed at that person, but take a step back and say, okay, we're both good, smart, well-intentioned people. Why didn't that go well? So just a little bit of pause and reflection, I think, is a huge and helpful thing. In the bigger picture, it's hard to say because this is really quite a wonderful university, but I think that we tout quite rightly things like our high graduation rate, high persistence rates for our students, but not every student graduates and persists, right? And maybe we think a little more deeply about the ones who aren't, even while we're celebrating the ones who do. Maybe we think a little bit about the people who are kind of maybe more struggling and at the margins, and are there things we can do to help uplift them a little bit, even while we're working with the majority of what's happening. The changing federal funding landscape is going to cause the university some deep reflection as we think about what we're going to do with our money related to the loss of grants, bridging over some of the grants, changing financial aid. There may be additional pressure on some of us to conserve money, to do more financial aid or student support. And I think that's good and that's wise, but as a community, we need to think not just about what does this mean for me, but how am I contributing to the university getting through a funding crisis? Might be something to think about. Again, did that get close to? Okay.
So I don't really have a question. But I wanted to tell you that that picture of that IBM computer reminded me of the display rate terminal I used to use summers during college, which was just about that time. So thank you for reminding me that I am not quite retiring yet, but hopefully soon. The other thing I wanted to comment on was simply that I greatly appreciate that part of your change management plan that you talked about includes the idea of self-care and of understanding the pressures and the personal situations people go through. We hear that. We don't always hear it articulated in a group like this, and I think it's really meaningful. I was talking to Anna Lewis before you began talking, and we both admitted that it's really hard because things that we never worried about before are now at the top of our minds. You know, what's going to happen, and nobody really knows. As I've gotten older, I've played more and more roles in other people's lives and had to take that on. So I appreciate you saying that and acknowledging that in this group, and we will miss you. Distributed IT will miss you.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I didn't want to misspeak, so I wrote out my question, but we've been launched into a world where we're suddenly forced to judge the value of different projects and work with a very critical eye. And I work in service delivery and UX work with WPS under AIS with very essential things like my UW. But when talking about budget cuts, we often focus on big ticket things like cancer research, things like that. But things like universal and accessible design have shifted from being nice to have to now being a policy and an expectation across the university. So as someone who came up in a strong startup culture to now being someone who had to steer our entire division, could you speak to that balance between that like nice to have work that you may have to advocate for versus the more explicitly valuable work?
Who's left on the more explicit?
Yeah, the more explicitly valuable work that everyone kind of gets versus the stuff that you may have to convince, but still makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say nice to have, the first thing I think of is by whose standards, right? That we're huge here, and we're incredibly diverse in the amount of work that we do. And one of the things we've always struggled with is what might be completely essential for just one class kind of looks like nice to have for a lot of others, and is, the one versus the many, right? I think that there are a lot of things that we can do to ease the way for the differentiation across the university to happen. And we've done a lot of this. We have about 200 applications hooked into Canvas right now. And so we create this supportable environment that feels customized, but it's not customized, it's supportable. I think when we look at things like the new accessibility standards that are coming to us, early days on this, and we have a lot to do, but we can actually begin to build affordances that help accessibility be baked in. So it doesn't become a thing a person has to do, but a thing that just happens. I talked before about our computers used to not connect to the network. We had to do it manually. They connect to the network now, for the most part. And but that was purposeful work by people to say, I want to change the paradigm. And I think there's a lot as technologists that we can do to think about how do we take away the barriers, take away the kind of the entry points that people have to go through to just make things happen for them. That, if we did the Wayback Machine, we would come up with 1,000 examples in this room of things that used to be hard that are now just commonplace. And I think that we have to think more about that and think about, as we do budget cuts, we're going to have to make some choices about what we do. And that's kind of hard because everything we do is used by somebody, right? And maybe we make choices about things that are more mainstream or defer some more of the kind of more innovative projects or other kinds of projects. But that's kind of a shading of choice and a shading of management that we do, of not that we're going to step away from all of this, but we're going to really concentrate on things that that fulfill this particular need. We're going to prioritize, I guess, is something to say. But I would encourage all of you, because you're all clever, is to use that cleverness to think about how to lift the barriers away and to solve real problems in a way that that take the pain away and are sustainable, because each of you has the ability to do that with your knowledge and your skill.
Hi, Lois. Congrats. Has to be closer to me. All right. Again, congrats on retirement coming up. One of the cool things in the last number of years was being able to attend the office hours, and wondering in retirement, do you have any plans lined up for yourself to kind of feed this boundless curiosity you have? How we bring in people from all sorts of places in the campus, and like every time you're like really interested in what they're doing, you want to hear some neat things from them. So yeah, if you have any ideas of what you're doing, and then if you have anything to share with the rest of us too, besides office hours, which has been a blast to hear from those folks on campus.
For those of you who don't know office hours, every Friday morning, for the most part, for the last 5 years, we've gathered as a community for informal conversation. We've had at this point about 300 people come on with us and just talk about their work and what they're doing. It is awesome. It is, we've learned so much from so many people, and it really works. Todd Schechter and I do this together, and when one of us meets somebody or is curious about somebody, we invite them to come tell the community what they're doing, which is why we know how they get equipment to Antarctica or to Greenland. We all needed to know that. It's how we understand how sports medicine happens and who takes care of the basketball team when they have ACL injuries, how the marching band works. We've just had to learn about all this. It's a really good question. My intellectual life has really been at work. And this question about how do I fulfill my intellectual life once I'm no longer working is one of those hanging questions for me. Not that I'm anxious about it as much as I know I need to be intentional about figuring that out once I'm not just kind of stimulated by everything around me constantly all day long. So, yeah, starting to think about kind of where I go, where I travel, what do I attend, what am I going to read, what new communities do I find, because the work community is so much a part of my life. And so yeah, I think it's an intentional act that I can't just languish. I have to do this, but definitely thinking about ways in which to do this.
All right. Thank you everyone online and in the room for your questions today. We're right about at time. So is there anything else that you wanted to say before we end?
I will say, take care of yourselves, take care of the people around you. Thanks.